Hi, Zadie. Years ago, I walked into a new client to deliver a keynote on project management to a group of leaders. And in the lobby, I saw the company's credo, which contained this sentence, word for word: we plan less and execute more. My first thought was, well, this should be interesting. So, to be fair, what they were trying to say is that they were a company that was trying to move fast, not to overthink. It was along the lines of what Mark Zuckerberg famously said, that Facebook would move fast and break things. Interestingly, I walked back in to deliver yet another project management session at that company a couple years later, and I smiled when I saw that they had updated their credo. It now read, everything we do, we build on a strong network, systems, and process foundation. I thought that was so interesting. And what most people don't remember is that even Facebook changed their tune to a much less memorable move fast with stable infrastructure. So we all want to move fast. I mean, today's reality demands it, but as it turns out, breaking things isn't sustainable. It's almost like we need a guide to help us move fast and fix things, which is exactly what we're talking about today. Ann Morse is the co-author of a new book entitled Move Fast and Fix Things, the Trusted Leader's Guide to Solving Hard Problems. In today's episode, Ann will discuss the relationship between trust and speed and why the success of your change initiative requires both. She'll walk us through a roadmap for leading change that you're going to find memorable and actionable. By the time we're done, you'll know what a fix map is, why inclusion is not just a buzzword, and if you're ready to start a change initiative next week, exactly what to do on Monday. It's a conversation I can't wait to share with you. But first, if you've been listening for a while, you know about our course, AI Made Simple, right? I mean, it's a practical guide to using AI in your everyday work. Reviews just keep coming in about how people are finding it helpful. One recent participant told us that if he would have known just a few weeks earlier what he learned in the class, it would have saved him and his team members hours of time on just one initiative. If you do the math, that adds up to a lot of savings. So we've developed AI Made Simple to help you on day-to-day use cases. And it's a rare week we don't update the course to keep up with the constant changes going on. If you'd like to stay ahead of the curve in the fast-changing world of business, AI Made Simple is a great next step. Learn more and join us at ai.peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Thanks. Well, let's jump into today's discussion with Ann about her new book, Move Fast and Fix Things. So, Ann, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Oh, thank you, Andy. It's a total privilege to be here. I think your listeners are my people. I think they like to get stuff done. So
that's
excited to be in this conversation with you.
Oh, yeah, likewise. As I mentioned in the introduction, Mark Zuckerberg popularized the phrase move fast and break things, which you're clear in your book and your book's title that you prefer move fast and fix things. So how about this? Let's give Mark the benefit of the doubt. I mean, what are some potential benefits of what he's trying to say? And then why did you feel it was necessary to look at it from a new perspective?
Yeah. And I want to give Mark credit where credit is due. He's actually evolved the internal mantra even further. So it's now move fast together, which is certainly aligned with the message that we're trying to share with the world, which is this idea that there isn't an inherent trade-off between moving fast and taking care of your most important stakeholders. And I think that's really our critique of this original phrase, because it implies that there is. And when, we have spent the last decade plus helping companies clean up the wreckage of move fast and break things. And one of the key lessons from our work is that the most effective leaders move forward at an accelerated pace, for sure. Speed is essential, but they also are quite intentional in building trust and investing in relationships and protecting those relationships as they go. So that's really what we wanted to explore and find out if we could codify what these most effective change leaders were doing and put it into a form where other people could learn from.
Yeah, and you do it very effectively. Actually, I'd say almost entertainingly in the book. And I think a helpful model in the book is your fix map, highlighting the relationship between trust and speed. So how would you describe the fix map for those of us that can't see it quite yet before they buy the book? And why is it helpful to understand before embarking on a change initiative?
Yeah, well, my co-author is an academic at Harvard Business School, and so they love a good 2x2.
Absolutely, got it
over there. But we really wanted to see, like, could we visually capture this idea of simultaneously building trust and moving fast? And it ended up being a helpful exercise to try to wrestle it into this framework, because what you see is when you're both building a lot of trust, so that's the vertical axis, trust, and the horizontal axis is speed. And when you're in that upper right, it's a category we call accelerating excellence, that's when you're seeing the outcomes that we're all chasing: high and rising stakeholder value, high employee confidence. Like one of the big tells on kind of where you are on this map is what employees are feeling and experiencing when they come to work. And this is a really critical unit of analysis, the way people feel. And so in that upper right is where you want to be. People are confident. There's this balance of creativity and innovation and also achievement, and people want to be there. They want to show up the next day. Now, when you go to the bottom right, which is move fast and break things, we call that reckless disruption. One of the things that employees are feeling is high anxiety, because the relationships at the center of that organization that you really rely on for the organization to succeed over time, relationships with customers, relationships with shareholders, relationships with suppliers, those are getting a little wobbly. And that's really, so sometimes organizations have to spend a little bit of time there, but we want to get you to the upper right as quickly as possible. The other categories are responsible stewardship, which is the upper left. So you're building trust, but you're not moving very quickly. This is the hidden mission of the of the book we wrote. This is the hidden mission of the book we wrote, which is that far too many organizations are actually moving too slowly to address their most urgent problems. And so, we got your attention with move fast and break things, but what we really want to do is increase the metabolic rate at which most of us are addressing the problems that really are barriers to our success as leaders and as organizations.
That's good.
And then the bottom left is inevitable decline. Nobody wants to be there.
Nobody wants to be there. But
everyone's miserable.
I was wondering if you're going to say something about that one, because before a workshop, we were talking to a client. Now, it happened to be a governmental client. This is not an anti-government statement, but we were saying, how would you describe the culture at your organization? And Andy, you know what they said? It's like the Hunger Games. And I thought of that in that lower left, right? I mean, it's like trust is low, so you always have to watch your back, and things aren't really getting done. It just felt like the Hunger Games, and that you call it inevitable decline, but it feels a little bit like Hunger Games too, isn't it?
It's so good. We're looking for the right phrase to capture each of these. Someone the other day whose company was in responsible stewardship said that it feels like a velvet coffin.
There you go.
Right?
I like it. That's good.
It's a death sentence, but everyone feels comfortable and no one really realizes what's happening.
Yeah, I like it.
But I think I found the bottom left one, which is Hunger Games.
Is that good? Yeah. I think the playbook is really cleverly structured around the days of the week, and from Monday to Friday as a metaphor, and how to start and end change initiatives. I think that's just a clever way to think it through. You mentioned a CEO who's made a habit of asking people on the front lines of his fast growing company, what would you do if you had my job? So tell us about Monday and how his question is just an example of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's funny, our publisher, when we first proposed this as a structure for the book, they were like, oh, it's a great metaphor. It's memorable. And we were like, no, we're deadly serious. You can do
right.
a ton of progress in a week's time. And we can.
That's actually a good point.
Yeah. When you really look at the number of hours, now you have to not do other things. So you have our blessing to drag this out over a matter of weeks. What we don't want you to do, Andy, is take months or even years to solve problems, which tends to be our default timeline for really going after the tough stuff. But we can get into that in a minute. So Monday we call Diagnostics Day. Monday is really about tunneling to the root cause of your biggest problem. So what tends to happen, particularly in moments of crisis, is we go after the symptom of a problem, but we don't really pause to figure out what's really driving it. And what we want you to do on Monday is really get in touch with your curiosity, which is this abundant, renewable, powerful resource that we often don't bring into the workplace. We get convinced that we are being paid for our judgment and not our curiosity, particularly as we ascend in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And the research shows that judgment and curiosity don't play well together. They essentially can't coexist. And so we have to be quite deliberate about inviting that inner scientist to work and realizing that your job on Monday and on many other days as well, we would argue, but definitely on Monday, it's to ask the right questions. It's not to have the right answers. And that's often a meaningful and difficult mindset shift for people.
So it's been a couple of months since I read the book, but I seem to recall one of the dangers of Monday is creating a task force. And so, like, if I remember, you made a distinction between organizing a team of problem solvers versus creating a task force. Do I remember that? Is that correct?
Yeah, we feel like the concept of a task force has really been kind of degraded, if not weaponized, in many organizations. It's often used as a stalling technique.
Yeah.
Now, there can be an overlap between a team of scrappy problem solvers and a task force. We just rarely see it happen. What you really want, you do want a team of people who understand the problem, are leaning into it, have that curiosity orientation. I think it can be a very powerful tool on Monday to go figure out what's going on in the organization. At this point, I just wouldn't call it a task force because we have all been normalized into thinking that task forces take a long time to make recommendations that no one really has to take seriously because there's no accountability connected to those recommendations. And so we suggest coming up with a scrappier, more entrepreneurial structure to move fast and try to uncover, again, the root cause of the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I like it. Task Force doesn't have good branding.
No, we need to rebrand Task Force.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job of that. Let's say a listener was going through your playbook, and on Monday, they came up with this. They said, our team makes project commitments that we too often don't meet. We consistently miss deadlines, which is hurting our reputation with our internal and external clients. So let's move on to Tuesday. What does it mean to solve for trust, and maybe some common mistakes people make when they're trying to do that?
Yeah. So what we want you to do on Tuesday is come up with a good enough plan to solve your problem, which is distinct from a perfect plan. This is an elusive, fantastical creature. It's never actually been spotted in the wild, Andy.
Right.
So your enemy on Tuesday is really perfectionism. You want to solve for learning, solve for growth, solve for speed, and really get into the organizational sandbox and play. So one lens that often helps on Tuesday, we've written a lot about trust in the last decade, is to really ask the question, what could I do tomorrow to build more trust than I did today? And we want you to ask that question at the level of the organization, because one powerful way into the problem is to think of the stakeholder at the center of the problem. So maybe it's a group of employees in your organization who aren't thriving. On Monday, you've really asked why. We would suggest asking why a number of times to get down to the root cause. So now you have some understanding of the problem. So go after it. And we suggest using a framework we call the trust triangle.
Yeah.
Trust at this kind of esoteric level isn't that helpful to us, but it turns out that trust has a very stable architecture. So the drivers of trust at the personal level, the team level, and the level of organization are authenticity, empathy, and logic. So at the level of organization, think about that stakeholder relationship. Are we revealing that we really care about the needs and success of this stakeholder? That's empathy. Are our words and actions of beliefs totally aligned in our interactions with this stakeholder? And does the logic make sense? Like, if it's a customer, is the value proposition like favorable? They're giving us our money and they're getting something in return. Is it at minimum equal to that? So I'll give you an example with employees, which we see all the time, because the problem is that if the issue is logic, no amount of empathy is going to help you strengthen that relationship. So one thing we see right now is that this fundamental contract between employer or employees is getting shaky. So you have particularly younger generations of employees showing up and saying, I want this job to be meaningful. I want to learn something. I want to be able to have an impact. I want to be able to advance in the next few years, not in the next decade, which was true for previous generations. And we see employers saying, yes, we hear you. Here's a yoga class as lunch.
Right. That's awesome.
That underscores how much we care.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we really want you to wrestle with on Tuesday, is really what is happening here. And now let's run some experiments and pilots to see if we can rebuild the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it. So let's say our problem-solving team spent time working on Tuesday to identify some key drivers to missing these deadlines. And the team believes organizationally we're overly people-pleasing to sales, which is a way of saying when they say jump, we say how high, and we don't work with them on what's doable. So I think that might be an authenticity wobble, maybe. That might be a way to do it potentially. So the team also believes that we rely on heroics too often, which might be a logic wobble, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And we have a penchant for hiring externally when we see problems instead of building up and advancing our internal people, and that impacts them as well. So let's move on to Wednesday, which puts a focus on looking at the problem through the eyes of someone who sees it completely differently, through different eyes than what we do. So what are some common misconceptions people have about what inclusion means? And maybe a couple ideas we could take from what you do mean to help Wednesday be a good day for our listeners team.
Yeah, on Wednesday, we want you to make that good enough plan that you came up with on Tuesday by running all your smart experiments. We want you to make it even better. Yeah. And we want you to make it better by inviting people to the table who think differently from you do. That's not intuitive for human beings, for the simple reason that we just really like people who are really like us. And so we tend to move through the same problem-solving groove of going to the same people again and again, because that's already a comfortable relationship for us. So we want you to get a little uncomfortable and just think about, the problem you're trying to solve. So maybe you are creating a culture where you are relying on heroic employees. So let's get the people in the room who are who are your so-called heroes, and just maybe go to the front lines if that's not something that's familiar to you, or bring in different generations, people with different tenures at the organization. We really want to get at people with different life experiences from you, different skills, different talents to contribute, different perspectives on the problem. So first we want to bring them into the room, invite them to the table, pull up a chair. But then we have to create the conditions where they can really contribute their unique information. And that's a separate step. That's why we're giving you a whole day, right, in this metaphor. We're really asking you to pause and really think not just about whose voice is missing from this problem-solving exercise, but how to create conditions where that voice can really be surfaced and really contribute. And there's some great research around, again, our human instincts not to do that, our human instincts to really connect on the things we have in common. That's not going to be helpful to you on Wednesday. You really want to be able to engage with the things that make you different from this new voice at the table. So we use a framework called the inclusion dial. It really starts with making sure that people feel both safe and comfortable to bring the things that make them different into the workplace. But what gets really exciting from a competitive standpoint, and this message is really getting lost in all the heat and churn around inclusion right now, is that when I'm valued not just in spite of what makes me different, but because of what makes me different and unique, then I can really contribute the things that will help this organization win and will help us achieve our mission faster and better than we could without this unique information and this unique perspective at the table. So we spend a lot of time on how to do it, but it starts with that orientation that when we get inclusion right, everybody wins. It's not this fixed pie fight over resources. It's really about creating a context where every single complex human being who shows up to support and advance this mission can contribute everything they've got at the moment that matters.
That's so good, Ann, because I feel like sometimes the misconception is it's a class you go to and then it's done, right? Or it's a check mark. Or in this case, maybe it's like, all right, we'll invite someone from sales, but as long as they don't speak, but it's
Right, because we're mad at sales now. So yeah.
Well, yeah, because you know how there's often that natural tension between silos sometimes, but it's not only inviting the silo to the meeting, it's hey, we're a we here, so let's tell us how, that curiosity from Monday, I feel like carries over in this one as well.
Oh so. Yeah, for sure. Super powerful. Yeah. I mean, our true north on Wednesday is what we call the platinum rule. So everyone's familiar with the golden rule, treat people the way you would like to be treated. The platinum rule is treat people the way they would like to be treated.
Yeah.
And it starts with humility and curiosity, you said, and the assumption that you don't know. And so you have to go find out. And that's the magic of Wednesday, is that act of going to find out, because it gets you out of your comfort zone. And it's a trust building act in and of itself to show up with humility in front of my friend Andy and have the conversation. What is it going to take for you to contribute everything that you've got? What's it going to take for you to be wildly successful in this organization? It's one of the most powerful questions that a manager can ask. And then listen for the answer with the humility that you may have no idea what the answer is going to be.
I love that, because I feel like those 4 words have helped me so much about the year and a half, but in the last year and a half. What would it take? Yeah. What would it take? Yeah. So I said, because I think too often we feel like we have to generate all the ideas on our side. But if we really get inclusion right, we get that we only see a slice of reality or truth or whatever. And, what would it take to make this work, and staying curious? Yeah. I like Wednesday more than I thought.
Yeah, most people like Wednesday more than they thought. Most people walk into Wednesday with some dread, because we call Wednesday Make New Friends Day, which is not an activity we like to do as an adult.
Right.
But many people find out that it's their favorite day of the week, because all of these new connections are made, and we really end the day thinking differently about a problem, which is a gift. But also this idea that leadership is not a solo sport really gets reinforced on Wednesday. And we forget that. We have all these myths about leadership, that it's lonely at the top, and that the crown is heavy, and that's a choice to do it that way. And it's not the best choice, right? The best choice is to really build a strong, diverse, and inclusive team around you. All the research is really clear on this point, was when you get this right, the performance payoff is actually quite extraordinary. You're more creative, you're more innovative, you're more resilient. And on the metrics, on just the basic performance metric, even things like stock price, there's persuasive research that when you really get this inclusion thing right, the company benefits quite holistically. And again, everybody wins.
Yeah, I love it. So I recall from your book that you really put an emphasis that change initiatives can really rise and fall on the stories we tell about them. And that's what Thursday is all about, if I remember right. So what are some elements of a good story, and why are those elements so important?
Yeah, Thursday is storytelling day. As human beings, we make sense of the world through stories. We think in metaphors and stories. And they also help us to activate and focus all the other people around us whose help we're going to need with that change. So Thursday really is about pausing and getting the story right. It turns out great change stories have quite a stable architecture. You can think of it as past, present, future. So great change stories honor the past, both the good stuff and the bad stuff, provide a clear and compelling change mandate, a really powerful why. Why am I going to follow you down the path and potentially jump off this cliff into an uncertain future? You got to give me a good reason. And finally, they describe a rigorous and optimistic way forward. They tell me what it's going to feel like, Andy, when your story becomes my reality. And it solves for the most important metric in leadership, is that other people have to be willing to be guided by you.
That's a good point.
And a powerful story is going to be one of the most effective tools you have for getting there.
I wonder sometimes if the part that we forget the most out of that structure? I remember thinking this as I went through the book, that honoring the past, and not only the good stuff, but the not so good stuff,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's sometimes it's like, all right, this is the new guard, or it's the, and we oversimplify how bad it was in the past, or we don't bring people along. Do you think there's some truth to that?
Oh, 100%. I think it for very good reasons, often too, because as change leaders, we're so impatient for creating the new that we forget that the people around us are quite attached and connected to that. In some cases, they want to preserve what's best about the organization, but sometimes there's unresolved pain in the past, and until you acknowledge it, it's going to be hard for me to move forward. And as leaders, we have a really powerful platform to do that. I'll give you 2 examples of that. One, we did a lot of work with Uber when it was going through its crisis in leadership. Now, going on a decade ago, and when the new CEO showed up, this was Dara Khosrowshahi. When Dara showed up and hosted his first all hands meeting, it was a very tense moment, and the company was just getting destroyed in the press. One of the things he did was stand up and said, I am here to retain the edge that has made Uber a force of nature. And
that's so good.
This was a line that was met with thunderous applause. It was the applause of relief for that crowd. He also joined a standing ovation for his predecessor, Travis Kalanick, who was also getting destroyed in the press. And, we were so struck by the grace of those choices. And that's really the word we want you to bring to your own storytelling. The people in that room had built something incredible, and they had something real to lose in this uncertain future. And Dara really acknowledged that complicated truth. So we want you to acknowledge the complicated truth of the people around you.
I seem to recall that chapter also had something about repeat yourself. That this is not just it's not just a one thing, but sometimes we say like, am I getting tired of repeating myself about this story? But isn't there a key part of that I recall on Thursday?
Oh yeah, you should be. You're getting this right if you are so bored by hearing yourself talk about the story. And again, like speaking of discomfort as kind of a useful indicator here, there's a lot of discomfort all week long, but this is a particular discomfort on Thursday. Is repeat the story, repeat it again, do it in video, do it in writing, show up on TikTok, repeat it one-on-one, do it in your all hands meeting. It really is, this is how we learn. We don't just learn through stories, we learn through stories that we hear again and again. So if you want this organization to follow you down the path, or this team, or this one other individual, repetition is going to be a really important part of that journey.
The reason why this really connected with me is there's a group of people that I'm involved with, and we're going through a book together. And one of the things I'll say at the beginning of every meeting is, this is not about doing more because we're already so busy. This is about doing things differently. And I feel like I've said it so many times that I'm almost getting tired of it, but I thought I'm following Thursday because otherwise we just start overwhelming people with this change initiative, right? That it just, wait. What are we trying to stay focused on? So keep reminding of the North Star, I suppose, right? That's part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, if you're getting bored, if you're sick of hearing yourself talk, then you're on the right track here. It's more important now than ever because we are being so bombarded by news and information and stimulation that to really break through all of that noise and keep people focused, you need a great story, and they need to hear it over and over again.
And plus, I think people think everything's the flavor of the month or whatever. And so if we don't stick to the story, they may think, oh, well, January is one thing, but it'll change in February. So it kind of reminds them that we're committed to, I suppose, right? So,
100%. Yeah. And the skeptics, and they're always skeptics, are going to see if they can just wait you out to see if there's another shiny object you're going to start chasing. Or if it's going to revert to the norm and to the status quo, which there's an incredible gravitational pull.
Sure, absolutely.
To keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, no doubt. So then Friday gets to moving as fast as we can. So what are some beliefs that can get in the way of moving fast? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think the one we see most often, which really keeps people up in the upper left on that fixed map and
Yeah.
responsible stewardship, is this skepticism about speed. Is
Mm.
this belief that there's something inherently reckless or imprudent
Mm.
about speed. And I always go back to um, Emerson's quote when in skating over thin ice, safety is our speed. In
Mm.
fact, in many organizations, it's the risk of standing still is higher than taking action, any action, and just getting the organization in motion. So that's a big one that we often push on. And I want to be really clear here, for anyone still stuck there. I think in looking at most change efforts fail.
Mm.
In looking at the ones that succeed, speed was an essential variable. So it's not an option
Mm.
to go slowly. It was Dr. King who articulated this most beautifully in a number of speeches where he talked about the fierce urgency of now. Uh, and the question is, so how are you going to move? Like, how can
Mm.
you, and how do you build trust as you go and not degrade it?
Mm.
And the thesis of the book is that there's actually a sequence.
Mm.
You spend Monday through Thursday. These are the core activities of building trust, and then the payoff by the time you get to Friday is now you get to sprint. You have earned
Mm.
the right to sprint because you're far less likely to break things.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is the more prudent way to proceed.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know if it's truly counterintuitive because when you say it that way, it makes sense. But I think it feels like the kiss of death sometimes in conversations I'm with but we need more information, right? It seems like that's a Friday landmine, right? Um, or I think you said something like, I think in the book that going slow is righteous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
right?
that's the more passionate view.
Right,
Is
yeah.
this idea that slowing down is the righteous thing to do, particularly in environments of burnout, or again where heroic employees are being relied on. And what we really push people to do is to address those problems directly. The issue is not speed. Like human beings at their best, we want to go fast, we want to sprint, but you have to create the conditions where that makes sense. Burnout is a separate issue, and we really push organizations and leaders not to confuse the two.
Yeah, there you go. Part of the Friday approach could include ideas from Agile project management. Since we have a lot of project managers listening, I seem to recall you had some elements of Agile project approaches in your book. So I think do I remember that you used some of those ideas or techniques in your work at the Leadership Consortium?
Well, first of all, I'm a huge Agile believer.
Yeah.
Um, and I think Agile practitioners will recognize both the structures and the themes everywhere, starting with Monday. A small group of committed team members who are iterating quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So we have talked about a process that scales up to the organization. I think some attempts to scale Agile all the way up have not been successful. But what we believe is that you can pull elements
Mm-hmm.
and certainly values and mindsets from this movement, and they work at the level of organization. Absolutely. So another one is on Friday, the idea of creating just a way to fast track projects that are most critical to the organization. So at Etsy, they call them ambulances, which is an unfortunate metaphor, but it really makes the point. That, not all projects are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
And some are more urgent. And can you create a mechanism to identify those projects and let them speed ahead and get the attention and resources that they deserve? That's, by the time we get to Friday, we have a ton of fun with just the tactics of moving fast, the tactics of empowerment, which, a less soft way to describe this is just distributed decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So if all the decision matter in your organization has to flow through just a few points, then speed is going to be a very meaningful trade-off. So if you can open that aperture just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In some smaller organizations, there's really one decision maker, even though, Other people are called managers and leaders. There's really, so can you go from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3? And that can have a big impact on an organization's metabolic rate. We really want to match the metabolic rate to the urgency of the issue. And that's the disconnect we see in so many organizations.
It should have been more obvious to me when I was going through the book, but now that you say it, like it's almost like change sprints, right? And you have your backlog, but you can't do it all. So we're going to focus on this, just like you were saying, right? And then we'll do a retrospective to make sure we're doing it right. I mean, it really does apply to your. It's almost. I don't know if it has to be a weekly Monday through Friday sprint, but there's an element of which it really is, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's very, that view, and I wholeheartedly embrace it, is very agile. To your original question.
Yeah. I don't want to miss the opportunity to ask you about your podcast, Fixable. So how do you like to describe Fixable to people, and what makes it unique, do you think?
Well, our inspiration was Car Talk. I don't know. The beloved show Car Talk.
Pick up and drop off.
Where they're just two mechanics on the line, and people would call in and workshop a problem. And so we asked whether it might be possible to do this for business and for organizations. So the show is called Fixable. Frances, who's my co-conspirator, and co-author, and colleague, and wife, and I do this. We bring very different perspectives. She's a technology and operations professor. My background is entrepreneurship, and really an interest in human potential and the unit of analysis of the individual and the individual leader. And she really thinks a lot about the unit of analysis of the organization and the complex systems that hold up that organization. So people come on and they bring us an issue, and they're coming from all kinds of different organizations, domains, life experiences, places in their own career trajectory. And what I love about it is that you really get to observe someone going from a closed relationship with a problem. Some of our callers are in a place of close to despair. But then by the end of the conversation, you feel them open up, and there are possibilities that were unimaginable to them before. Partly it, hopefully we're helpful, but also sometimes you just need another person to pull yourself out of that crouch. So what I love, Frances will give you a very different answer. What I love about the show is that watching each other do that is quite infectious. And so it gives us a chance to broadcast that transformation to a much larger audience and really invite people into the kind of work that we do.
Yeah, that's cool. I feel like there's nothing more inspiring than hope sometimes. And sometimes people feel like they're in a hole they can't get out of. And it sounds like you don't give them the exact ladder that they're out of it tomorrow, but it gives them hope that there are ideas here.
Yeah. No, everybody walks away with a plan.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's really fun. We've had a ton of fun doing it, which we didn't know how much we would enjoy creating this thing. And Andy, you know how much fun this is. And so that was a great gift of the last year.
That's cool
to experience that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it. There's so much more I'd like to talk to you about, Anne, but let's end with this question. We've got a lot of parents actually who listen to the podcast. And can you think of any ways that you've applied any of these ideas as a parent to your sons by chance?
I have learned so much about leadership from parenting, and I have learned so much about parenting from leadership. So it's every day. I'll offer two. I mean, the lesson on Monday of what can happen when you really give curiosity the wheel and leave judgment out has been a really powerful lesson as a parent too. Our boys now are on the cusp of adulthood, and even when it seems obvious to me when they have made a mistake and they've done the wrong thing, showing up with curiosity, with authentic curiosity, and just asking, well, what was going on here for you, and how did you get from A to B? has had a big impact on our relationship and the trust between us.
Yeah. I'm thinking, as a parent, we've got 5 and 3 of them are out of the house now, but, sometimes what are the stories we say as a family, and how stable do those stories stay? And I don't know. I think, like you said, there's so much we can learn about leadership at home and home from leadership. So, for those listening, in many ways, project management leadership are about leading change, ultimately, probably far more than we actually appreciate. So if you've resonated with this discussion, get a copy of Ann's new book, Move Fast and Fix Things. I put links to the book's website, and Ann's podcast in the show notes for this cast. So, Ann, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thank you, Andy. This has been a terrific and energizing conversation.
Thank you.